Hello and welcome to day 5 of COP26, with the question hanging over the COP now, which is this the first whole of society COP? Well, it was definitely Youth and Public Empowerment Day on day 5 of the Glasgow Climate Change Conference. Hello and welcome. My name is Andrew Petersen and welcome to the program. Before we begin, let's acknowledge that this is being broadcast to you from the land of the Camaragal people, and we acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and we particularly welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that are joining us today. And thank you, David T, for the comment in relation to the T-shirt. I will explain all very soon. So Friday's focus on youth and public engagement, or how policy makers work most effectively with civil society to champion and drive forward systemic change required to avert climate catastrophe was very much on the agenda. But the message, I think, was clear. And to rephrase an old song, and I will attempt to sing it, when I was 17, it was a very bad year. Because while the IEA has estimated that the flurry of new zero commitments put 1.8 degrees of Celsius of warming within reach, apparently, other projections are less optimistic, and many contentious issues remain far from resolved as the Glasgow summit nears its halfway point. 10,000 school kids and supporters gathered on Friday's For Future March in the streets of Glasgow, while inside the Glasgow Conference Centre, events focused on youth, giving them a glimpse of the world they are likely to inherit. And as some might argue, it looks like they're going to want to talk to a lawyer about the dud deal that they're going to be handed. Meanwhile, negotiations continued with the pursuit to resolve key issues before the subsidiary bodies, or let's call them what they are, working committees, closed their work on Saturday. Highlights of their activity currently include negotiations on both finance and adaptation. On the topic of finance, I've heard a number of reports, both from Claire O'Neill of the WBCSD, the Australian government briefings, and the briefings that are provided by the business and industry non-government organisation meetings held each morning, that a number of new collective quantified goal on climate finance is actually being proposed, which does not aim to set a specific number, for example, 100 billion per year, but rather establish a process for countries to learn and decide how much finance developed countries will provide. On the issue of adaptation, these discussions are now focusing around how to develop and implement national processes to build resilience and reduce vulnerability to the effects of climate change. Meanwhile, around the conference centre, youth events were front and centre, which is the top right-hand picture. There was a youth statement forwarded from the 16th Conference of Youth, which had been held alongside the G20 just before COP. And the message from that, which I found particularly interesting and quite heartening, was that youth must be meaningfully and actively included in decision-making processes to safeguard their future. It is only a little regrettable that the people receiving it don't look like they are in any way youthful, although one would add that they were youthful at some stage. In terms of other themes, though, the very foreboding picture of former Vice President Al Gore at an event called Destination 2030, making 1.5 degrees Celsius a reality, the former vice president claimed that society will enter an era of radical transparency as we focus on the implications of where the pledges and actions that are not delivered, and could ultimately trigger a wave of pressure from the public for accountability and, in fact, increased climate action. And I think this is one of the critical issues coming out of this COP for business to keep an eye on. So you are here now, technically, on day 6, both in Glasgow and also in Australia. And as daylight breaks on day 6, designated Nature and Land Use Day, already in the last few hours, we've seen a number of announcements. Just a few of them that I've already picked up. The WWF and top UK supermarkets have announced they will team up in pledge to halt biodiversity loss. The UK government has announced 45 countries have signed up to a new coalition designed to accelerate efforts to expand nature-based solutions to the climate crisis. And the World Economic Forum is expected to launch a new global initiative designed to reach 100 million farmers in net zero and nature positive innovations by 2030. And meanwhile, a series of further announcements are expected from governments that are designed to extend marine protection zones and support the commitment earlier this week to end deforestation by 2030. Well, that's enough from me. Let's now welcome in our panelists, our COP stars, as we're calling them. I will stop the share and I will open the blinds. Ask them to open their blinds and welcome them all. And let me particularly welcome Ava Zabey from Business for Nature, but also welcome back Linden Edgell from ERM and Melanie Bishop from Macquarie University. Let's turn firstly to Melanie, because she is no longer a COP novice. And the first question to her is, okay, a couple of days later and you're into the whole process and the whole logistics and the whole trade and circus and negotiations. What's your take on it so far?
Thank you. So yes, you're right. It does certainly take a few days to get into COP. There's a lot going on. I guess the main program, the UK presidency program, and also I guess all of the goings on in the pavilions with countries and NGOs running their own programs there. And then of course there's also the Green Zone, which is really focused on public outreach and education. So no, I mean, it's been really exciting to engage at different levels. Yesterday, I spent most of my time in the Oceans Day program run by the UK presidency. So it was really nice to see that recognised as an important issue, because I believe it hasn't got a lot of coverage in previous COPs, even though the oceans are 70% of our area on Earth. And so that was really exciting. There are some great commitments to nature-based solutions in our oceans being announced. Costa Rica is showing a great deal of leadership in the way in which it is including and committing to ocean-based, nature-based solutions in its NDCs. Also Seychelles, Belize, what are some of the other countries? Ecuador, Colombia. So there's some really good commitment and leadership happening in that space, financed either by blue bonds or debt for nature swaps. There's also been the announcement of a really significant new marine park called the Eastern Tropical Marine Corridor. So that's Colombia, yes, Costa Rica, Ecuador and Panama. So that's really exciting as well, because I guess one of the commitments or the goals is that, you know, by 2030, we're going to achieve 30% of our oceans in marine protected areas. And I think initially the figure that we were at was 7%. And then with actually some more detailed analysis that was revealed that we're actually only really at 3%. So we've got a lot of work to do in that space. So that was really encouraging as well.
But they are incredible announcements. And who would have thought that COP would, this COP would particularly highlight those particular areas of concern. Let me be shallow though for one moment. You've been swanning around with a lot of important people over the last couple of days. You want to share with us who they were and what your take on their engagement with the COP has been.
Yeah, so those that were present on the 2nd of November would have heard that I guess the reason I'm in Glasgow is as one of 15 finalists in Prince William's Earthshot Prize. So I represent Living Seawalls, a Sydney-based organisation that has come up with a way to essentially rewild our concrete coastline. So bringing life back to, you know, the really rapidly increasing number of marine structures that are a side effect of a real booming blue economy. And so the shop 3-day event for us, which was really aimed at giving us a global platform, both with business leaders and with the world leaders themselves, and also connecting us with those people that are going to help us in scaling up our solutions. So it was really, really encouraging to see that, you know, I guess this isn't just dollars and support for the winners, but Prince William is absolutely dedicated to the cause. So he was present at every one of our events, and to be personally introduced to my own Prime Minister by Prince William was an absolute thrill. We've invited our Prime Minister back to the Sydney Institute of Marine Sciences. So we're hoping that we can really showcase some of the great climate research that's being done in Australia, and you know, perhaps that will help also to highlight, you know, I guess that we have this incredible position in Australia, and we shouldn't squander you know, our position in terms of poor climate policy.
So I'm tempted to think about that very old song, I Dance with the Girl Who Danced with the Man Who Danced with the Girl Who Danced with the Prince of Wales, or whatever, however it goes. So, you know, 7 degrees of separation between myself and Prince William. Ha, who knew? Linden, let's pop over to you. And you told us last night that you were going to have a fairly major day for Youth Day. My question was, how many of them got caught up and or trapped in and or decided to protest as part of the march, if at all? How did it go?
Well, I'm not sure how many decided to march. I asked them not to tell me if they did. But it was interesting. We were 2 blocks from George Square, which is where the march ended up. Now, I was in the session at the time, but by the time I left at 5 o'clock, there was about 100 people, and it was probably 100 people, 500 police, and it was all very relaxed and people just milling around. So right. I missed Greta and all the action, unfortunately. But I think they were a bit, from what I'm hearing from some of the delegates or the young people I spoke to kind of on the streets, I think they were a bit disappointed that there weren't more folks. I'm not quite sure the reason behind that, whether it was a little bit challenging to get to Glasgow, whether they were discouraged or not. But anyway, they'd had a good day, so I think that's the important thing. And from our company, those who are at the younger end of the spectrum were quite excited to be there and to feel that they could, I guess, contribute their voice and feel part of the action at this point in time. You know, it's a very important topic to them, and I think their connection, their feeling empowered to actually, you know, have a voice around this is really important.
Yeah, no, that was a great initiative. I thought of stealing it and bringing it back to Australia. The challenge of bringing them to Glasgow, I'm interested in understanding the logistics of organising that, because hearing sort of horror stories about the challenges of getting to Glasgow and then getting around Glasgow in the last few days. I appreciate that ERM's probably got that well under control, but did you find that was a challenge?
A complete challenge. So we brought people from across the UK. We actually brought them into Edinburgh on Thursday. We have an office in Edinburgh, so we had them in Edinburgh. That was our base. It was much easier to do it there. So they did some connecting on Thursday, and then we brought them across by train on Friday morning. But there's the normal logistical challenges. At one point, we had the Scottish rail strike, if you remember. So a week ago, we were trying to figure out how we do that amongst the train strike. And of course, there's this little thing called a pandemic that also is going on. And so just the protocols and trying to think about how do you safely manage bringing people from different parts of the country here. The laws in Wales are different to the laws in England, different to the laws in Scotland. Right. About how you manage these things. So there's layers of complexity. Definitely, there's layers of complexity. And of course, you know, keeping them all safe is our priority.
And let's broaden that out to how have the Glaswegians/Scots greeted this COP? Has it been with open arms? Has it been with begrudging acceptance that there's 30,000 people who will bring their wallets, and therefore, after a pandemic, at least you're able to commercially secure some sort of success out of this, or are they genuinely excited about their city being on the global stage?
I think it's all of the above. Right. We've got 2 offices here, 2 companies we've recently acquired, and so we've been, you know, connecting with them very much. most of their staff just decided to sort of get out of town, basically. So you can wander around the cities. Right. In the last few days, you can wander around the city in the middle of the day, and it's quiet. It's very, very quiet. It was a bit more action last night. It was Guy Fawkes night here. So for those of you who don't know how that works in this part of the world, people get very excited and let off fireworks. So there was a bit more of an atmosphere around town last night. Other than that, it's quiet. But I think there's a bit of a mix of what is this really something? I think they want Glasgow's name will be forever associated with this COP, and I think there's a sense of we'd like it to mean something because we'd like it to feel like, you know, Glasgow's name's attached to it. So, but the hospitality's been fabulous, really fabulous.
Great. Yeah, well, and that's the story, that the shops and the restaurants and the cafes have been incredibly welcoming of those attending. And ne'er a bad news story has come out at all, which is fantastic. Talking about good news stories, nature's on the agenda, Eva. Only taken 26 years for it to get onto the agenda. And your role, your organisation is very much front of centre in the next 18 hours around that particular agenda. Question to you, A, why has it taken so long to get on the agenda? B, what do you hope it being on the agenda is going to achieve for the overall aims of the UNFCCC's outcomes? And thirdly, what are you going to be doing today?
Right, thanks so much, Andrew. Sorry, my connection in my Airbnb just failed a minute ago, so I dropped off. It's going to be a busy day.
You should see the mice. You should see the mice on the carousel with the wire connecting up to the. Anyway, no one. Go on.
Yeah. Great. I think we all want to know what your T-shirt, where the story of your T-shirt. So I'm going to go quick. But nature is definitely all over COP here. Everywhere you turn, there is something around reversing, halting nature loss. There's oceans, there's forests, there's, really ecosystems are very central. And that compared to Madrid is night and day. Like it really is. There's been an awakening around the role that nature needs to play, which is amazing. Why it's taken so long is probably quite a deep question I need to think about more and explore. But I think partly it's because when we talk about nature, it can seem really fluffy for people, and it still is not so well defined somehow, without an overall global goal we should all be working towards. So that's some work we've been doing with many other organizations this year of saying, okay, we need to reverse nature loss by 2030. We need to end up in a nature positive, net zero, equitable economy, looking at the integrated approaches. So I think now there's a bigger high-level narrative that has been very effective. We also have the sister CBD, conventional biological diversity progress, that has also been driving engagement around biodiversity and nature in quite a constructive way, and then momentum that we've never seen before. So now we have more than 1,000 companies that are urging governments to adopt policies now to reverse nature loss in this decade through the Nature is Everyone's Business call to action. It wasn't really a plug for that. It was just to demonstrate that the momentum that we now have, that we did not have a year ago. I also think there's been a development in nature-based solutions understanding. So I think there used to be a sort of the climate community thinking of nature only as a way to reduce emissions, suck up emissions, and help maybe adapt to climate change. And then the conservation community saying, wait a second, hang on, you can't just do that. You've got to look out for biodiversity, livelihoods, water management, etc. And now I don't hear that anymore here. Everyone is talking about high quality nature-based solutions when they're talking about them. And there is an understanding that we're trying to address multiple challenges and not only carbon sequestration and adaptation. So I think that's been quite a positive development. And in part, it's also because of the high-level champions and the COP presidency that have been really pushing for nature to be on the agenda. I think we need to use this energy, this momentum, this engagement, these commitments from COP26 and bring them to COP15. We need to start bridging these COPs much more strongly. And that is starting to happen, I should say. But there is a bit of a that I have to admit there are a few things that are coming up. You know, there is still the question of whether the commitments that are being made are really enough. Are they really new enough? And are they just the same sort of thing that's also been said in the past? For businesses, you know, offsetting or having issues with measuring impacts and disclosing them can no longer be taboo. Like, we need to be open about discussing the challenges, what's working, what's not working. And this whole greenwash, you know, people are getting sick of the name greenwash, but it's really the accountability, in fact, is the word that really has to stick in everyone's mind, in terms of everyone is expecting all actors in society to have a shared accountability for our global commons and the planet as a whole. Otherwise, other cool stuff that I think the value of nature, and I think Melanie was talking about this, I think embedding the value of nature in decision making is coming out in more discussions, and having representation on the table from youth, from for the planet, in fact, and Indigenous peoples, and this idea of having representatives of that in the negotiations and then in boardrooms, etc., is coming up more. So yeah, so I think that's probably some of the key highlights from what I'm hearing here. Today is a big day, Nature Day, although crazy. I mean, there have been so many announcements before Nature Day, so there are going to be a whole lot more now. There's a new report coming out this morning on Indigenous people's rights, which I think will be particularly interesting to look into. It's just come out. I haven't had a chance to look at the details, but headline seems to be, you know, this mapping of the fact that Indigenous peoples are stewards for, you know, what is it, nearly 1,000 million, like 1 billion hectares of land, but they only have the rights to less than a half. Melanie, you're nodding. You know did you mention the report before? I don't know. But anyway, I would, please don't quote me on it. I need to read it, but I just see that as one that is really worth looking into, because I think that's a fundamental issue that we need to talk about as well. So yeah, so we have an event, I should say, sorry, so let's
your event,
because we have an event where in about an hour, where we are launching some just initial case studies of businesses that are taking an integrated approach to climate and nature, or at least trying to take an integrated, or thinking about taking an integrated approach to climate and nature action. This was an illustration to try and say, well, even some of these leading companies still find it really hard. They understand the interconnected challenges, but in practice, how are they trying to now bring these two together, always keeping people at the center? So just sharing some of their journeys, really, and then building from that. So that is a complement to what We Mean Business and Business for Nature came out with in the summer, in July, with these high-level policy asks for the planet. So there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of convergence, I think, in some of our messaging. And for sure, nature is completely central in this whole COP. It's very exciting.
Well, it's the epicenter.
Yeah, it is.
That's what I love. They've made it on a Saturday, and it is therefore the epicenter of the conference. Last question to all of.
I don't know about it being on a Saturday being the episode.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well,
I don't know how.
I'm talking it up, Eva. I'm talking it up.
Yeah, okay.
Last question for all three of you. We'll start with Linden. We'll go to Melanie and then Eva, and end on Eva. And the question is, because we're all going to have a big sleep on Sunday and then plan our week for the last week of COP, what are you all looking out for? What are you going to be most interested in seeing achieved, progressed, discussed, debated, announced, whatever that may be? Linden, first to you.
Well, first to say on Sunday, of course, Andrew, Australia is playing Scotland at Murrayfield.
Oh,
so there is a bit of a contingent potentially making their way to Murrayfield on Sunday.
Oh my goodness. This could be the end of a second beautiful relationship, but anyway.
So once we all make it through Murrayfield, I think the rest of the week, for those, I think for business, so there's obviously the Blue Zone will kind of continue on the outside. There's a number of kind of commercial conferences kick in, and I think there's a sort of a new wave, or certainly from our client base, there's a new wave of people coming in for week 2. And the conversations we're having with them is they're kind of all trying to scratch their head and go, okay, how are we going to do this? All these commitments are landing, but actually, how do you execute on any of these commitments at the pace and scale required, with the level of capital required? Like, how do we put all the pieces together? To make sure this actually happens? And there's a lot of head scratching going, okay, this is all well and good, but this is going to take a lot of work and a lot of collaboration and a lot of working in ways that we haven't worked before. And working in up and down the value chains to make sure we deliver, because the accountability question, I think, is huge. I think the pressure coming from all the different stakeholder groups is huge. And I think business is it has to deliver. So I think that's week 2 is, how real is some of this? Yeah, and who would any of us thought that would be the question business would start to ask itself at a COP? Oh dear. Melanie, what are you going to be looking out for and or participating in?
So I'm really looking forward to cities next Thursday, and I guess I'm really interested in how some of the initiatives like I guess green buildings councils and that kind of stuff, how that might actually extend to this absolute proliferation of construction that we're seeing in our oceans. And, I guess we've heard from the CEOs of, some of these companies that are driving the charge with offshore wind generation, that, they're absolutely committed to enhancing biodiversity as well. And this is something on their radar. So I'll be really interested to hear more about how exactly that's going to happen, and I guess how what's already going on in the terrestrial environment might inform that as well.
So progress on natural infrastructure, if I could summarise it poorly. And Eva, finally to you, your big day is today, so you've got nothing else to do next week, right? Yeah.
No, I'm joking. No, but
I'll meet you for coffee, Eva.
Yeah, no. We're super. We have. There's still a lot on. I was joking, of course. I think I'm just really curious to see how fast our discussions in the corridors evolve around dealing with the accountability, because the businesses in this and finance are in the spotlight for sure. And it would be, and rightly so, all these conversations are completely legitimate, and I'm interested to see how companies then publicly react to that in the sessions where they're speaking, and looking forward to then using this as a catalyst to get into those clear metrics, clear process, give the confidence, the robust, the assurance that we are all then operating within planetary boundaries. Thanks, Andrew. You're going to talk about your t-shirt now?
Absolutely. So, as you say, we're moving rapidly to a discussion about nature today. And as I always show you, attendees, small as you may be, but highly focused because you've stayed with us. Thank you. Today is Nature Day. And as Eva has outlined, it is a full day of activity, both negotiation amongst the delegates, but also numerous announcements and events that we expect to see trickle out during the course of the day. And of course, we'll be reporting on those on Monday evening. We're all having a little snooze, going into a small fetal position and trying to replenish our batteries, all ready for the second week, which we thought the first week was busy. I suspect the second week is going to be even busier. Now, let's talk very quickly about Monday rather. And as I do, I need to access something. Yes. So the summit heads into the weekend. Many observers are apparently cautiously optimistic that the 26th COP is delivering positive progress, although there is a myriad of outstanding issues, as we've all been identifying, yet to be worked on through by these negotiators as they prepare for final talks over this weekend and then hand over to the political class to actually come through with the deal. One thing I wanted to leave you with, though, was an interesting observation that's coming through from a number of quarters, which is whilst there's been this positively anthropogenic related tidal wave of broadly positive announcements out of the COP, the observation is that the media on the ground is reporting the COP itself is coming into question, and serious criticism because of apparently the naive and feeble ability to accurately report what is actually happening in Glasgow and what will happen as a result of the net zero transition as it plays out. And I got this very interesting insight from James Murray from Business Green, who believes that if the media allows the response to COP26 next week to be stripped of any context or shorn of any nuance and shaped by climate skeptic talking points, then the efforts of you, the efforts of us, the efforts of all that are involved in delivering this historic step forward in the global mission to avert climate disaster, well, then they will have actually done a very grave disservice. So I'm hoping that that's not going to occur. We're starting to see some of that leak through in the Australian press in particular. But we'll share with you our summation of progress on the slightly extended Monday night's program, along with David Benatar, the CEO of Warehouse Group, Lisa Cliff from the Climate Action Network Australia. Very excited to welcome her. Our delegate on the ground, Matthew Warnken, will also return, and there possibly might also be a few more friends who have arrived for week 2. About the shirt, yes, I forget which COP, but it was the COP held in Montreal, and it was in the green zone, and they were handing them out. And I picked one up, brought it home, and my wife said, "Never a truer word said about you, darling." And with that, can I say thank you so much to Linden, to Melanie, and to Ava for joining us on a Saturday morning at 7 o'clock in Glasgow. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the audience, albeit small, but perfectly formed and have stayed with us. As always, respect the science, respect nature, and respect each other. My name is Andrew Petersen. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe. Bye for now.